us versus them is not a new concept. I've got a few of the. I'm in New York City, and it started here too. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, I've got a few of the trending items sort of lined up here on social media from what's happening with ICE rounding up people and the protests around it. But one of the great massive lies that the globalist agenda is trying to indoctrinate and have everybody believe. I mean, let's define globalism, right? It's about a picture greater than yourself, bigger than your local community, bigger than your tribe, bigger than your state, your city, your province, your country. It's global. And this notion has been going on for good, I don't know, 20, 30 years or so. I mean, like, I remember when I was a kid in public school here in Canada, they used to talk about the difference between Canadian culture and immigration and American culture and immigration. And the curriculum made American culture and immigration look really bad to me when I was a kid. What they said was, to the students in class, was that America is more of a melting pot where you immigrate, you go there, and then you sort of just sort of melt into this goo of Americanism, is the way that they would essentially put it. In Canada, being the glorious place that it was, because they would always try to sell you on it, even with the high taxes and shit weather, was a fruitcake, kind of like a Christmas cake. If you guys have ever had one of those nasty Christmas cakes given to you, they're often gifted around the holiday season. People bring them over. I mean, they were popular in the UK, fruit cakes and stuff like that. But nothing really blends in. It's like there's a chocolate chip over there. There's a piece of whatever green thing or a red thing, and it's supposed to be some kind of fruit. I think it's mostly manufactured or fruit roll-ups or whatever. But each identity remains itself within that fruitcake, that Christmas cake, which is kind of what Canada, is still trying to be, even though it's moving more towards a globalist agenda. I could pick you up at Toronto Pearson Airport. You could fly into my city right now. I could pick you up at the airport, blindfold you, drive you to a part of the town, and you would swear that you're in Hong Kong. I could then blindfold you and drive you to another part of the town, and you would swear that you're in Portugal or something like that, with the exception of the architecture and the buildings. But all the signage, all the people, everything will very closely resemble the origin of those immigrants. And that's just the way Canada's always been. They've I guess tried to encourage these communities, which I think is probably better than the notion of globalism, right? And I'll get to that in a second. Whereas, the States is just kind of like a blended pot of whatever. You take, whenever they take gold, silver, nickel, copper, like all these metals, and they mix them up and they create these rare or the exotic metals that they make for watches or cars or whatever. There's a melting pot of shit that goes in there that sort of gives you the final product. And that's what they told us in school, right? So America's bad, right? Because they have a melting pot and there's no clear identity. So why does this matter? Well, because we've always lived in an us versus them world, right? And I think that in some regards or ways, a lot of the times, people ask me like, well, Rich, you want to get out of Canada. The tax environment sucks. I know you have family obligations when you're ready to go in a couple of years. Where are you going to go? Where's this utopia? I haven't found it yet. I don't think there is a utopia or a significantly better place. There's probably better places. There's places that have lower tax rates. There's places that have better climates. There's better places that have a lower cost of living, for sure. All of those things exist outside of Canada. I mean, you can find all of those things probably in Florida, but then you deal with another, set of problems that sort of come along with that. And one of the things that we've gotten away from that existed for a long time was the notion of tribes, gangs, community, culture, race, and all this sort of stuff. And they're trying to mix that up. They're trying to mess with that. Um, they're trying to blend that into like this. Somebody made a joke about this, a stand-up comic. I think it was Russell Peters, Indian dude. And he's like, yeah, in 20 or 30 years, he looks at the crowd. He's like, 20, 30 years, you're all going to be beige, you know? And there's truth to every joke, right? Like there's a seriousness to it. Identities that are Asian, black, white, parts of Europe, like there's very clear identities that exist in different parts of the world. And what they, quote unquote, are trying to do, I'm going to use they versus us versus them. But what they are trying to do is they're trying to make everything sort of blend in, conform, uniformity, look past differences, and pretend like there's zero existence of any whatsoever, which simply isn't true. For millions of years, we've always behaved in a very tribal manner. Your city, your continent, your king, your emperor, your gang, whatever it happened to have been, was over there, right? When the Romans built out the empires, when the Greeks built out the empires, when the British built out the empires with their shipping, when the Vikings, did all their raids, throughout England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, parts of France, and all that sort of stuff. They still operated in a tribal manner, and they put theirs together, and they identified who us was and who they were, and they made a very clear pattern of behaviors that sort of followed around that. And what they are trying to do right now is remove that, and that's why they are pissed off that ICE is rounding up the illegals and shipping them out. I'm going to get into some of the weird stuff that's going on in that in just a little bit, but I'll pull that up on the screen shortly. But I just wanted to establish what the us versus them sort of concept is. You define who us is, you draw a perimeter around it, you defend it, you protect it. It's not that you don't deal with them, that you don't have any interaction with them. There's no trade with them. There's no commerce with them. There's no friendships with them. It's just you have a clearly defined us versus them. Nothing wrong with that. It's always been that way. And the people that are trying to remove those borders, and I'm going to show you some examples of that in a second, or suggest that nobody's an illegal. Everybody has rights to everything all the time. This is something that personally grinds my gears, right? Because I was born in England and my family came here when I was a young boy, and we had to immigrate through the conventional means. You had to prove that you had skills. You had to prove that you had the ability to support yourself, contribute something of some value to society, that you spoke English, and that there was going to be some use that would come out of it. And I don't think I became a Canadian citizen until about 10 years after we immigrated. I've got the Canadian citizenship card somewhere upstairs, and I was about, I don't know, 12 or 13 or something like that. But that's just how it was, right? And they want to remove that completely. It's just like, you can state a claim and just show up. And that's only in Western countries. Most countries don't deal with illegal immigration, refugee claimants, migrant, this and that and the other thing. They just don't have any patience for it. I was on my coffee with Coop Zoom call this morning with some of my guys at 7 a.m. sort of chopping it up and talking about some of these riots and stuff. And it's like, one of the guys brought up the notion of Japan, and he was very interested in maybe moving to Japan, and he likes the idea of Japanese culture, but he realizes that he would be an outsider, right? He would be one of them, one of the outsiders, one of the expats that live over there versus the us that are the Japanese, right? That are part of the, they have their own set of problems over there. They got a strongly decline in birth rate. They overwork, a lot of their men, that are the corporate droids. So it's not a perfect culture. It's not a perfect colony by any stretch of the imagination, but they clearly define who us is. And they don't tolerate things like, oh, we want to, like a migrant ship shows up on the shore. They won't have that. It's off with you, right? Or they show up and they want to claim like refugee status. That's not one of the countries that's like, oh yeah, come on in. live in our housing. Here's some free shit. Here's a phone and $2,000 or $3,000 a month, like allowance for you and your family. It's just a country that has no tolerance for that. So I get, that people are looking for a tribe, a gang, or whatever it is that you want to call it, and they always will. And that's one of the huge issues that I see with the United States today. Again, a lot of people are like, you should come to this state, you should move down to the States, it's way better down over here. And it's like, yeah, there's lower tax rates, the climate's certainly better, the weather's better, the cost of living's better. I can buy a house 2 or 3 times the size of this one with the same money for this one because of the cost of living down in the States. Fuel's cheaper, cars are cheaper, insurance is cheaper. But then again, what good is all of that if people are going to lose their shit and have a fucking riot every couple of years and burn down the city and vandalize everything and steal stuff and throw bricks at people and just lose their ever-loving minds, right? So when it comes to the us versus them, this is the other thing that we also talked about too, was I personally think that it's long overdue that certain countries, and I think the United States is certainly one of them, needs to define the us versus them politics. All right, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed that clip. If you want to check out the full-length podcast episode, you can find that right over here. Also, make sure you visit my website over here where you'll find my supplements, the opportunity to book me privately one-on-one for coaching, and most importantly, my new School of Unplugging, which you'll find on the courses tab. Newer to the channel, hit subscribe.